We talk about price. I talk about price because it's easy to talk about price. It's easy to make that as an example. But there's so many other things in any negotiation about a car or about a contract or about a house that you can talk about and that you can haggle over, if you will. But the principle is the same. Words mean something in negotiation. Every word means something in negotiation. And be precise. And don't suggest anything that you're not willing to accept. Rule number 3 is, I think, the easiest one to explain, but maybe the most difficult one to put into practice. And that is, be willing to walk away. You have accurately valued the car. You know what your bottom line is. You know what you're willing to pay for that car. You have to send a signal to the seller that unless you get your number, you're walking. You have to send a signal to the seller that you don't have to buy his car. In litigation, you have to send a signal to the other side that you're willing to not make a deal, you're willing to go to trial, you're prepared to go to trial. The worst signal that you can send in any negotiation is to sit down and show that seller that you're going to buy this car today, no matter what it takes. You will. You won't be happy afterwards, but you'll be able to do it. The worst thing that a seller can do, on the other hand, is to sit down and send the signal that he's going to sell you that car today no matter what it takes. He will, but he won't be happy. The good news is, if you do walk away, there's probably, with a Cadillac anyway, another dealer down the road with another car that you can start the process all over again. You can also go back to the seller, and I've done this, and see if maybe you can renegotiate and come up with a deal. Very rarely does that work, but you can try it. But the bottom line is, you have to be willing to walk away, and you have to send that signal. Otherwise, you're not going to be very successful in your negotiation. The last of the 4 principles I have written down is, remember the ego. And I say that because I think all of us have a tendency to, and certainly a ability to box ourselves into a corner. And then when we're boxed into a corner, we don't know how to get out. No one wants to look like they've lost the negotiation. They've lost something. And so your goal is, number 1, to be modest and make sure the other side, the seller, thinks that he's won the negotiation. He's gotten a good deal. If he thinks that, then he's more likely to agree with you. So how does this come up? How does this, remember the ego, comes up? Well, if the seller says to you, $35,000 is my bottom line. It's the lowest that I will possibly take. No more. And you're sitting there thinking the most that I wanted to pay for this car when I walked in here was $34,500. You've got a problem. Because the seller has boxed himself in. Now that's subject of another rule that we're not going to talk about tonight. But how do you get him out of the box? How do you get out of that situation? Well, there's 2 ways to get out of that situation. The first way is, give the seller a reason to save face. Point out something that you hadn't talked about before. Remember, there's only $500 apart, or $1,000 between you. Point out something that you hadn't pointed out before that gives him a reason to say, okay, I know I said $35,000, but we didn't talk about that before. I think you're right. I'll concede. I'll meet you halfway, or I'll pay, or I'll accept $34,500. Maybe it's something about the motor. It's smaller than you'd discussed before. Maybe it's an additional dent that you happen to find while you were walking around the car. Maybe it's something that you held back. Maybe it's something that you kept in your pocket that you didn't mention until now, just for this type of moment, which is a good idea to do sometimes. But give him a justification, a reason for him to agree with you without disagreeing with himself. The second thing you can do is to save your own face. Concede, or tell him you'll take the $35,000. You'll pay his money, but he's got to throw in something additional. He's got to give you something in return. Now, whether that's a free undercoat, or if it's a Sirius radio, which I would recommend, they're very nice. But you give yourself a reason to come off your figure without losing credibility in saving your face in buying that car. The fact of the matter is, when you're talking about $10,000, neither the seller or the buyer objectively should walk away from $500 or $1,000 difference. The way to do that, if one of the two of you have boxed yourself in, is to make sure that one of the two of you saves face. And that goes with the ego. So now you've heard the 4 most important rules. You're ready to go out there and buy that car and negotiate that deal. No, not quite. There are 7 more that I didn't mention. But I think if you use these 4 rules, you're well on your way to buying that Cadillac for your price, or if you have the money, buying that Jaguar for your price.